There are experiences that do not leave visible marks, but transform everything inside. Most people call it a difficult phase. Others say it was just another pain. But those who truly went through it know it was a test. A kind of silent judgment, which has no audience nor certificate, only transformation. This test has no name. It has no manual. It happens in the solitude of nights without answers, in the fatigue of continuing even when there is no strength, in the pain that no medicine resolves. It is an internal crossing. And those who make it change. They do not become better, wiser, or more enlightened, just more truthful. About the signs that appear after the crossing. They are not visible achievements nor ready-made phrases to post. They are deep changes, almost imperceptible to those who look from the outside, but glaring to those who live within. If you recognize yourself in these signs, it does not mean that you are cured or ready. It simply means that you passed, that you crossed a phase that many avoid, that you endured pains that few understand, and that even with scars, you continued. This is not a guide to transform you. It is a mirror so that you may see yourself. And if in the depth of your soul you feel, this is it, know that you are not alone. I am George, and before we continue, I ask that you follow the channel and turn on notifications. Signal 1. Loneliness became a sanctuary, not a punishment anymore. There comes a point when silence stops being an emptiness and becomes a sacred space. Those who pass the test of the soul begin to perceive loneliness in a completely different way. Before, it was heavy. It hurt. It seemed like abandonment, exclusion, punishment. It was as if the world had moved on and left you behind. But something changes. This sign does not arrive with a celebration. It reveals itself when you realize you are alone, but no longer feel lonely. The pain of absence turns into presence of you with yourself. And this is not a cold isolation. It is a kind of deep, honest, silent companionship, but full of meaning. The distractions that were once necessary lose strength. You begin to move away from empty conversations, noisy parties, meetings that only serve to fill time. There is no longer a need to rush to fill the silence. The silence now reveals. It shows what is alive inside, what needs to be healed, what still pulses with truth. At this stage, you begin to hear things that previously went unnoticed. I am not talking about external sounds. I speak of your own intuition, the inner voice that was almost never heard because there was always too much noise. Now, in the space of solitude, that voice becomes clear, and more. Loneliness becomes a fertile ground for transformation. It is in this place that new ideas are born, that old wounds heal, that more authentic decisions are made. You realize that time with yourself is not a loss, it is an investment. It is where you truly align with who you are. Most people run from loneliness because they are still trying to find themselves in the reflection of the other. But when the inner reflection is faced with courage, the escape loses meaning. You stay, you listen, you sustain yourself. Those who have gone through this kind of transformation know, loneliness is not absence, it is refined presence. And only those who have already known the pain of absence and consciously chose to cross it reach this understanding. Signal 2. You made peace with your shadow, without denying it, without hiding from it. There is a part in each of us that was taught to be denied. Anger, jealousy, the desire for control, insecurity, vanity. All of this was labeled as ugly, wrong, dangerous. And for years you may have fought to always seem good, always calm, always right. But a time comes when the mask becomes too heavy. The internal suffering accumulates until something in you breaks, and in that rupture, a truth appears. You can no longer pretend those parts of you do not exist. This sign arises when you stop running from yourself. When you look at what you avoided for so long and choose to say, "I see you." Not as one who judges, but as one who understands. You begin to see that the shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a forgotten side that needs to be welcomed. Signal 2. You made peace with your shadow, without denying it, without hiding from it. Everyone carries a part not shown. Impulses, fears, desires, and thoughts that were labeled as ugly, dangerous, or shameful. This part is the shadow. For a long time, you tried to dress it with good manners, control every reaction, smile when you wanted to scream. The mask worked until it became too heavy. The turning point happens when you decide to look. Instead of pushing anger down, you ask what it is protecting. Instead of hiding jealousy, you investigate where your lack asks for care. Instead of denying the desire for control, you recognize the need for security behind it. Judgment gives way to curiosity, and curiosity opens doors. Making peace with the shadow is not allowing yourself to hurt others. It is taking responsibility before the emotion overflows. You learn to breathe before responding, to step away when the body trembles, to return to the conversation when the head cools. The interval between the trigger and the action becomes larger. In that space, choice is born. Energy changes form. Anger becomes courage to say no. Envy becomes a compass for what you want to build. Fear becomes planning. The desire to control becomes clarity of boundaries. Nothing is discarded. Everything is recycled into useful strength. The signs appear in everyday life. You apologize when you are wrong, without humiliating yourself. Say no without drama. Face difficult conversations without trying to win, but to understand. Accept compliments with gratitude, without inflating. Receive criticism as data, not as a sentence. The guilt for having needs dissolves. The shame for feeling human things diminishes. A serene firmness emerges. This peace also protects. You begin to distinguish a request for help from manipulation. You offer presence without disrespecting yourself, affection without self-abandonment, compassion with boundaries. Your presence becomes stable. Those who live with you notice that you are more predictable in actions and more truthful in words. Simple practice shadow journal. 3 lines per day. 1. Trigger that caught me. 2. Real emotion behind it. 3. Small action that honors that emotion without hurting anyone. Another practice, transmutation. Name the emotion and ask, what need of mine asks for care? Attend the need, not the impulse. Peace with the shadow is not an end. It is a living relationship with yourself. Instead of fighting half of who you are, you integrate. And integrated, you walk whole. Signal 3. You became immune to the projections others try to place on you. A phase comes in life when you begin to realize that many of the criticisms, attacks, judgments, and even intense compliments you receive have nothing to do with you. They are projections, unresolved parts of other people that, without realizing it, try to put onto you. Before, all of this hurt you. A comment crossed your day. A crooked look generated doubt. You asked yourself all the time if you had done something wrong. You wanted to please, you explained yourself, you apologized even when you didn't even know why. But when this sign manifests, you become more aware. You begin to notice patterns. The other person's criticism reveals more about their emotional state than about who you are, and that brings clarity. A clarity that does not come with arrogance, but with lightness. Now you hear an accusation, and instead of reacting, you observe. You feel the weight of the words, but you do not let yourself sink because of them. It's as if there is an internal filter, a wisdom that asks, is this really mine? You understand that it is okay for the other to project. It is part of their process. But you also understand that you no longer need to absorb everything. It is not coldness, it is protection. It is emotional maturity. This sign also changes how you respond to other people's dramas. You stop entering emotional games that are not yours. You no longer feel guilty for not saving everyone. And this, in a way, bothers those who got used to using your energy as a crutch. But you know that your role is not to carry the weight of the world, nor to be a mirror for others' traumas. Your role is to be whole, to be clear, and whoever wants to walk by your side will need to do the same work. It is at this point that you become a different kind of mirror, a mirror that does not lie, but also does not attack, a mirror that does not accept emotional load that does not belong to it. And this peace, this lucidity, is one of the clearest signs that you passed a deep test and came out of it lighter. Signal 4. Time stopped being an enemy and became a dimension for you to inhabit. For a long time, time seemed like a monster, a force that ran ahead of you, demanding results, pressuring choices, making you always feel late. It was as if everything had to happen quickly. And if it didn't, you were failing. But those who pass the test of the soul learn something that changes everything. Time is not an enemy. It is a field, a space that can be lived, felt, respected. You stop fighting with it, and you begin to inhabit it. This sign appears when you realize you don't need to run all the time, that not every answer comes immediately, that some things are only born in calm, that there are wisdoms that are not revealed in a day, but in an entire cycle. You begin to notice how anxiety gives way to trust, not because you became complacent, but because your relationship with rhythm changed. Where there used to be haste, now there is presence. Where there used to be pressure, now there is process. This is reflected in how you deal with your decisions. You no longer feel you need to have everything defined. You do not despair when something takes time to happen. You understand that there is an internal time and that it does not always match the time of the world outside. And that's okay. This kind of awareness cannot be imposed. It is born from within, after much friction, much pain, and much listening. You stop measuring life in deadlines and start feeling it in depth. Time now no longer terrifies you. It accompanies you, like a dance partner, and you have finally learned the steps. Signal 5. You embrace the cycles of death and rebirth as part of your path. Many people believe that growing is a straight line, that life is made of climbing steps without stopping, always forward, always up. But those who pass the true test of the soul discover a deeper truth. Life grows in spirals, and each rebirth begins with a death. This sign appears when you stop resisting endings. Instead of clinging desperately to what is collapsing, you learn to let go. You recognize that certain relationships, ideas, roles, and even versions of yourself have already fulfilled what they had to fulfill. The pain of the end still exists, but it no longer paralyzes. Because you know, from a very intimate place, that something new is coming. You have learned that darkness is not the opposite of light, but its womb. Silence, pause, confusion. All of this is now part of the process, not enemies to be defeated. You begin to feel when something is dying inside you, and instead of resisting, you accompany it. With respect, with listening, with presence. And this accompanying, by itself, is already a rebirth. These deaths are not always grand. Sometimes, it is the end of a belief that limited you, the end of a habit that harmed you, the end of the need to please, to prove, to control. And after each small death, something freer is born. You realize that the more you let go, the more lightness enters. The more you honor closures, the more space there is for the new. There is no longer desperation for an immediate beginning. You know how to wait, and you know how to surrender when the new cycle announces itself. This sign also brings with it a new courage, the courage to reinvent yourself as many times as necessary, to abandon old certainties, to accept that changing your mind is not weakness, it is wisdom. The soul that went through this process carries a different serenity. Because it has died a few times in life, it has undone identities, it has restarted from zero, and discovered in each rebirth a more authentic version of itself. You understood. Growing is not accumulating. It is dying to all that prevents you from being. Signal 6. External validation lost control over your value. For much of your life, you sought to be seen. You wanted to be accepted, recognized, admired. You shaped words, attitudes, even dreams, all to fit someone's expectation. And when you were praised, you felt alive. When you were ignored, you felt empty. This sign begins to appear when that dynamic loses strength. Not because you became an island without feelings, but because something inside you matured. Others' recognition may still be welcome, but it is no longer necessary. It no longer defines your value. You learn to look at yourself with more clarity, to approve yourself, to listen to yourself first, before seeking others' opinions. And that changes everything, because the energy that was once spent trying to please is now invested in being true. This does not mean you became rebellious or antisocial. It means you reconnected with an internal compass, a sense of knowing who you are, even when the world does not understand. You begin to make decisions based on your truth, not on others' reactions. This sign also reveals itself in how you deal with criticism. Before, every negative word became an internal earthquake. Today, you listen, you evaluate, and you decide if it serves you. If it doesn't, you let it go, without hurting yourself. Compliments also change places. They stop being a currency that buys your self-esteem. You thank them, but you do not feed yourself only with them. Your foundation has become firmer. You began to sustain yourself from within. The freedom that arises from this is immense. You create with more authenticity. You speak with more truth. You live with more lightness, because you are no longer trying to fit in all the time. You learned that your value is not in applause. It is in your presence. This kind of security does not come from arrogance. It comes from the emotional maturity of someone who has been to the bottom of the pit of doubt and returned with the certainty that they are worthy, even imperfect, even in construction. Now you validate yourself, and that is enough. Signal 7. You protect your energy as one protects something sacred. For a long time, you said yes out of fear of seeming selfish. You gave too much, exhausted yourself too much, adapted beyond what was necessary. You helped everyone, solved everything, put yourself last. And you thought this was generosity. But deep down, it was exhaustion in disguise. This sign appears when you understand that your energy is a sacred resource, and that not everyone has the maturity to access it. You begin to ask yourself, does this nourish me or drain me? And this simple question changes the way you relate to everything: people, projects, conversations, environments. This change is felt inside first. It is as if a silent space is created within you. A space that says, here, only what makes sense enters. And from there, the filter activates. You feel when the exchange is real. You feel when they are only using you. And with delicacy or firmness, you withdraw. Some people will find it strange. They will say that you changed, that you are colder, more closed off. But you know, you are simply more whole. You are returning to yourself. You are learning that giving without awareness is the quickest path to emptiness. This sign also brings you more vitality, because the energy that was once wasted pleasing or solving what was not yours is now channeled to what truly matters. You take better care of your emotional health, your creativity, your peace. You become more selective, not out of vanity, but out of wisdom. You are no longer available for empty conversations, toxic relationships, obligations that betray your values. Your presence becomes a sacred territory, and those who enter feel it. This awareness does not push away. It filters, and what remains flourishes. Signal 8. Your creativity became the voice of your soul, not a means to prove something. Before, you created to be seen, to be approved, to feel that you had worth. Every idea, every project came with the weight of comparison, of pressure, of expectation. And often creativity got stuck, because deep down it was not free. This sign appears when your expression begins to come from another place. A quieter, more intimate, more truthful place. Creativity stops being an effort and transforms into a flow. You are no longer trying to prove anything. You are simply allowing something to flow through you. The need for perfection dissolves. You create with imperfections, with flaws, with soul. You allow yourself to err, to test, to discover. Pleasure returns. Curiosity is reborn. Comparison loses its power, because you understand that what is born from inside has value in itself. This sign also reveals itself when you realize that your art, your writing, your work, your project does not need to be grandiose to be real. What matters is that it is authentic, that it represents you, that it is aligned with who you have become. You stop following formulas, stop fitting into trends. You begin to listen more to your rhythm, your way, your truth. And in this process, something magical happens. Other people begin to connect with you more deeply, because what comes from the soul touches the soul. Your creativity becomes healing. Healing for you and for those who encounter you. Not because you wanted to teach anything, but because you dared to be honest, dared to show yourself as you are, without mask, without pose. You understand that creating is like breathing, that it is not about the final product, but about the process, and that what flows from you is exactly what needs to exist in the world now. At this point, you cease to be creative and become a channel. A clean, open channel, available for life to manifest uniquely through you. And that is priceless. Signal 9. You trust the invisible elements that guide your path. This sign is almost impossible to explain to someone who has never passed through it. It is like a silent knowing, a certainty without proof, a trust that does not rely on logic. But you feel it. Deep down, you feel it. For much of your life, you wanted to control everything. You wanted guarantees, certainties, defined plans. Any deviation made you anxious. Any uncertainty became a threat. But after the test, something changes. You begin to perceive that there is a greater intelligence guiding the ways, and that not everything needs to be understood. Some things only need to be felt and followed. This trust is not magic. It is born of surrender, of having lived the chaos, and even so having survived, of having lost control, and even so having found direction. It is as if the soul says, you do not need to see everything. You only need to keep walking. You learn to make silence to hear signals, to respect intuition, to say, I don't know, without shame, to wait for the right moment to act without forcing time. This sign also moves you away from overly rational environments that deny everything that cannot be measured. Because now you know, the invisible also speaks. People's energy speaks, feelings speak, life speaks. And you listen. Not as a fortune teller, but as someone who lives with more presence. You read between the lines. You notice when something vibrates differently. You follow what resonates with your interior. This trust is not blind. It is intimate. It is born from the relationship you built with mystery. And you no longer need to convince anyone of it. You simply live. Those who watch from the outside may not understand, but you know. You know that there is something greater guiding the path. And finally, you feel part of it. Not always does victory look like a victory. Sometimes it takes the form of silence, of no longer needing to prove anything, of feeling a peace that depends on no one, of looking back with gratitude, even without having forgotten the pain. If you identified with the signs you read here, that does not make you better than anyone, but it reveals something rare. You went to the bottom and returned. You faced yourself in a world where everyone runs away, and that changes everything. From here, your life may still continue with challenges, but you are no longer the same. You are not easily deceived. You do not get lost in external voices. You do not hide from yourself. Your presence now carries gravity. Your listening has depth. Your gaze sees beyond. And whoever comes close feels it, even if they do not understand why. Because there is a soul there, awake, marked, whole. You did not pass the test by not falling. You passed because you fell and got up. Because you lost and continued. Because you cried and still did not close yourself off. This content was not made for the masses. It was made for those who feel, for those who live, for those who passed. And if you have come this far, it is because your soul recognized something that words can hardly explain. You passed, and that is already everything.